I thought it was past due that we talk about an undersung hero on our channel. And this is really an undersung hero. This is my Hobart Handler 140. And yes, I'm going to come right out and mention the brand name. I don't know what the quality still is on this brand name, but back when I bought this welder, it was tremendous. I've had Hobart welders, pretty much every welder I've gotten. I don't have the money to go out and buy a big old fancy welder and spend bukus of money. It's just not going to happen. So what I need is a good small welder that can get the job done. Now, the thing is with this welder, it is only a 110 volt welder. And here in the United States, that's kind of a big deal. For my 2 or 3 international viewers, which apparently I do have. Hello, y'all. Good to see you. But for my international viewers in the United States, the electrical current is a little bit of a mess, really. What we have is we have a low voltage that all of our outlets run off of. So, you plug it into the wall there. But a lot of you, if you're in Australia, you plug into the wall, you're already at 200 volts or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. I'm sorry. I'm not from Australia. But you've already got a pretty good amount of current. Here in the United States, our wall current is 110 volts. So most anything you're going to plug into the wall is going to be that measly 110 volts. And it'll work, but then we have to have special outlets for a lot of the appliances in the house. And really, I'd tell you, anybody from another country like that, and particularly like Australia, I'm looking at you. If you're from Australia and you're looking at this saying, man, that sounds like a giant pain in the rectum, you're absolutely right. It's just frustrating. So due to the situation here in my shop, this shop was never meant to have industrial tools in it. And so I don't have a very good power supply here. And basically what I'm actually doing is, and I guess it's time to go ahead and talk about this. You'll notice some various things here around, and this is a working shop, so it's a little bit dirty. But you see this thing here? That right there coming out of the floor? Some of you might know what that is. I damn sure know what it is. That is my water well. And so that is 100, let me try again. That's a 220 volt electric motor, 100 feet down on the ground, that pulls water out of a well for me. And I'm very, very lucky to have this because I have some of the best drinking water you can get your hands on. And seriously, it is really good drinking water that I get out of this well. I am so lucky. But this shack or shed or whatever you want to call it was really just built just to run that well pump. And so my supply line coming into this shop is not what it should be for running a welder. So you think, fine and good, go and buy a 220 volt welder, wire it up and plug it in. You got your breaker box right there. But notice how dinky this breaker box is. I don't have the power to do that. I would love to have a 220 volt welder. But I have to say some things. First off, this welder is, at the time, it was like the second rung up you could buy. I believe it was a 135 or a 130 that you could buy. And it was literally not even set up as a MIG welder. It had flux core in the wire, which basically a flux core wire means I don't have my shielding gas and I'm using a flux in the core of the wire to kind of hope that I get a good clean weld. And so that's bad right then and there. And I used to have a 130 or 135. I can't remember the exact numerical designation. I'm sorry. But we had a major, major lightning strike out here. And we used to have lightning strikes that you wouldn't believe. I can't even believe them because I've been through a couple of them. and just insane lightning strikes. I think there's really a big old piece of iron right under my feet. And that's why we had those insane lightning strikes. Well, one evening we had a lightning strike that, if you were too close to it, it would have damaged your hearing, giving you permanent tinnitus. As far away from it as I was, I probably should have got tinnitus out of that. And I do have a little tinnitus, but just big old wham and just really loud. Well, what did that lightning strike do? It managed to fry two very expensive pieces of equipment. My neighbors up the street, they had a phone that it just blew the power transformer, busted it in half, and just destroyed the phone. Me, I lost a welder over the deal. That lightning strike was powerful enough. Once you tried to reset that welder and plug it into the wall, it would kick the circuit breaker right off. So it was fried. And so I went and bought this welder. Now, I'm going to come right out and say, this is 20 years ago or so now. I think I paid right around $600 for this welder. Now, that might seem cheap nowadays, and I'm sure it is, and I'd hate to go and look at the prices of what one of these welders is nowadays. But for being a little 110 volt welder, this thing has welded back together chassis, it's welded kitchen cabinets together, it's welded spurs, like what would go on your boots. I welded a pair of spurs together. I can't get that on camera. I'm trying to point at my boot. I've welded spurs together. I've welded anything you could really think of on this thing. I pretty much welded together with it. And thin metal, thick metal. You might remember this grinder motor over here, which I love. And there's the switch right here that I used this welder to weld. So what point am I trying to get at here? Well, I guess the point I'm trying to get at is you don't need the most expensive welder in the world. And welding is one of those skills that will really get you started and really move you in a new direction with your projects. Now, I have to say, welding has to be used correctly. If something needs to bolt together and come back apart, don't weld it together, because then you're going to be cutting things up and it's just going to be a disaster. So welding should be used, in my opinion, in some ways as a last resort. But it's not really, I just say last resort in that I mean, you need to know when and where you're using it. It's a very powerful skill, and you need to know when and where you're using it and what consequences you're going to face from using that skill. So welding is good. You just got to use it the right way. That continuing, though, what are we really looking at here? There's a couple of things about this welder that, yet again, this is Great Outdoors Garage. So there's a couple of aspects of this welder that are a little bit different than what you've seen before. Some of it is pretty straightforward. Now, one of the things I'll tell anybody, you get you a good wire feed welder like this, go in and get the kit to upgrade it where it runs the big spool of wire. These kits are not that expensive. Sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head how expensive they are, but they're not that expensive. It adapts it where you've got this big spool on here as opposed to the little spool that wouldn't be much bigger than the diameter of this wheel that tightens down here. You don't need that. You're going to save a lot of money. You can get online and buy these big spools of welding wire and just save yourself a ton of money. So that I'm a big believer in that. Always save yourself a ton of money. Now, other things I have had issue with on this welder is way back when the wire feed started giving me trouble. And so I replaced the wire feed. And yet again, like a lot of people would look at this wire feed, and yeah, it's got plastic parts in it, and the nicer welders have steel parts in it. But I cannot stress enough how I have used and used and used and used this welder. This thing is a workhorse. It has worked great in all the time I've had it, other than having a little issue with the wire feed. And the other issue, I would say, I did actually have another issue, I should be honest. There is another issue. If you notice my welding cable here, most people that weld are already looking at that going, what the hell is that? So what these welders come with is what is referred to as a coaxial cable. And a coaxial cable just means I'm making a bunch of different diameter passages, and it's all around the same axis. So basically meaning it's all concentrical. So like I've got a circle and then a bigger circle and a bigger circle and a bigger circle, and it's just housing what I need to do. Well, originally these come with a coaxial cable on them that runs the welding head here. Well, here's the thing with that. Those break, and they absolutely did on this welder. And it was something like, at the time, I believe about $280 to replace that cable that went on here. And it was only 10 feet long. And I'm like, I need a little bit more footage out of this thing so it's more versatile. So I hashed a plan, me being the kind of person I am. And you can put in swears against me there if you want, but here's what I did. See this red thing inside there? That is the wire feed for the actual welding wire right there to come out of. Okay, so that's your sleeve for feeding the wire feed. I took and threw another cable up this, which is our power cable here going out to the end. And this is a big heavy duty cable, professionally crimped on each end. And so that goes out. And then there is another small hose in here that runs my argon gas, my shielding gas, out and into this tip end. And so I made all the fittings in here. It barely fits under this handle, but I made all the fittings in here and everything, and made this custom cable that is, I think it came out to about 14 feet long. I wanted it 15 feet long, but I had some production losses, for lack of a better term. That has worked for me for 15 years or so. It's worked a really long time, and it works fantastically. And so, you know, I would recommend that to anybody if you're in a pinch. Oh, by the way, the outside sheathing on this is just like flexible clear cable you'd get to go in a washing machine. Back in the day, there was a hardware store, and you could just buy this at the hardware store. By the way, there's the sound of my well pump coming on. Anyway, this works excellently. So this works for me. Now, let's talk about some other things that are going on here, because you're looking at this welding cart and you're going, what's that? This is an old rototiller. Okay, and for those of you that are old enough, and it's getting to be pretty old now actually, there used to be rototillers, and the tilling tines were in the front of them instead of in the back of them. The modern ones almost all have the tines in the back, which just seems to work better. It seems to be a little bit easier for the user to use and make the machine work. But the old ones had the tines in the front. So basically, your engine would be back here, and it would almost stand up straight, and the tines would be right down here, and this would be the part of the tiller that would dig into the ground. Now, we've replaced that. Bonus points if you know that came off of Lucille. Well, I guess I ruined it already. But anyways, And there's different scraps of metal that I had around to make the bottle mount. These wheels are off an old lawnmower. These pair of handlebars, if you don't know where that's from, well, I guess you never learned to ride a bike. But it just comes together and it works. And kind of the other day, I mentioned real briefly this welding cart that actually came with this welder. And I don't like this one because it sits the front of the welder down flat like this. I want the front of this welder to be tipped up so that I can see the knobs and they're turned at me. And so that I know, where I'm adjusting and how I'm welding. Now, other things that come down into the welding situation. And this comes down into personal usage stuff. I have certain ways I like to set up my welds and certain ways I like to do my welds. And that comes into some of the other equipment I've got over here. I've got some random stuff sitting around. Bonus points if you know what that's off of. Some cool episodes coming up. Anyway, I am what I like to call, and I don't know if I can say this. Well, I guess I won't say the name. But there was a musician who was very popular, and he liked to wear one glove. And I say that of my welding technique. I weld with one glove on. Now, why do I do that? Well, it's a matter of articulation and it's a matter of freedom with the hands. This is hard to do one-handed here with the phone on, but okay, I got my welding glove all the way on. And then what happens is I'll take and I'll cradle my welding head like this. And a lot of times what I'm doing is literally taking my hand and setting it down on what I'm welding that's very hot. And yes, I know this is a bad example because it's not really pointed where it is, but I don't have enough hands. And this hand, my left hand, will be, see if I can maybe kind of give you an example here. Now, there's no way I can do this but this hand will be working ungloved. And I'll be welding like this, and this is my control because I'm left-handed. And my right hand, as I'm welding along, will be underneath here like this as a guide. And you can see how much I roast these welding gloves right there along that finger. A lot of times I have a technique. I'll get my hand so hot as I'm welding, I'll just take my welding glove and chuck it on the floor like that because it's so dang hot. But that works. I can get a good consistent weld like that. And what I would tell anybody about welding is you always want to be as comfortable as you can be, and you always want to be in the best position you can be. So here's the thing, like I just talked about. In this situation, like I can probably rest my hand like this and use it as a guide. What if I can't? What if I don't have a support like this? Well, I have another technique. Let's see if I can pan the camera down and show you this. There's my hip. If I put my elbow into my hip as hard as I can, now, see what my right hand does? It pivots perfectly. Now, if I'm trying to hold it out here like this, I'm going to be jiggling around. And, even in your best day, you're going to move around, okay? And there are those people that are steady-handed out there. I've never been one of them. So me, I always have to brace against something. So if nothing else, brace against that hip. And now my hand will pivot across an arc. And so I can make a nice weld now. The biggest thing I think I really see from people trying to weld is they come along and they think, oh, I'll just weld this one hand, and they do that there. You're never going to get a good weld that way. And you're going to get what's called a popcorn weld or a booger weld. Both are bad things. Now, I have seen people say, I've occasionally seen people call a good weld a booger weld, and it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. But you really want to, bracing myself against my hip with my left arm here, when you weld, you see how my hand's wandering? That's too much already. So if I can position myself, maybe brace myself up this way here. Still a little shaky left to right, but I want to be able to go. And even that's probably too fast, and you could see I was still wandering up and down a little bit. My advice to anybody trying to learn how to weld, and this is the most important thing I can say, two things. One, my favorite welder in the world, Jesse Combs, once said to somebody, slow down, slow down, slow down. She's absolutely right. When you start learning to weld, you've got to learn to really burn it in. The hotter you can get it before it absolutely just blows apart and falls away, that's what you want. You want it good and hot. It's going to bond that weld together, bond that metal together, and it's just going to work better. Now, the thing is to do that, to make a nice, clean, pretty looking weld, and you see these people, these super pretty welds online, I'll tell you, there's two things about that. Two things. One, you need to be able to see. If your eyesight isn't what it should be, or if your welding helmet is dirty, you are not going to make a good weld. Second thing is be comfortable. Get yourself into a position where you can brace yourself against something. You're never going to move as smooth as what that weld needs. So always have some sort of guide, something to help you out to get a good, steady weld. You know, it's nice. You see these welding videos. I've seen a few where, instructional videos, and the guy's just welding along with one hand and looking cool. And it's like, yeah, they never zoomed in on that weld. And there's a reason why they never zoomed in on that weld. Some of the other things to talk about is good equipment. Good equipment. And I highly recommend these auto darkening welding helmets. This one here, yet again, was kind of inspired to me by Jesse Combs to use, and I need to clean it up. You can see it's getting pretty rough out here, and so it's getting hard to see out of. These auto darkeners are great. And at first, when I first saw these, I thought, that's just prima donna BS, and just, oh, look at me, I've got an auto darkening welding helmet. Yeah, then I used one. Here's the deal. With a welding helmet, the older styles that don't auto darken, the minute this welding helmet is down, you're blind. And, if you're trying to position a tack weld and everything and do kind of a precarious weld, which you're going to do, without an auto darkening welding helmet, that can be a pain. And it can take you about 2 to 3 extra minutes per weld, I notice. When I started welding with this the first time, I had a big project I was doing, had a lot of tack welds to rig up, and then a lot of finish welds to do. In this, I was able to just kick the welding helmet down, tack, 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 and then move on, weld, 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 weld. Excuse me. And I'm like, whoa, this welding helmet just saved me a couple of hours. So these are absolutely a good investment. Get you an auto darkening welding helmet. They'll make your life a lot easier. Now, beyond that, welding skill, welding control. A welder like this, or even a fancier one, you're not going to be able to control well enough to weld something thin like that little switch when we welded that. So you have to adopt techniques. Basically, what you have to do is find a setting that's going to kind of work on the welder, and then weld, watch the temperature of the steel, then let off. Wait, weld some more, watch the temperature of the steel, let off. And basically what you end up doing is controlling the temperature manually. Any welder needs to know that. You have to learn that if you're going to be a good welder. How to control the temperature before it burns away. And to come to those comments, I've got our 2 knobs here on our welder. And this is just a simple welder. The fancier ones come with more knobs on them than this. And if you really know what you're doing, they can do amazing things. And it's great. But this welder here, with my skill and just ability, particularly knowing this exact welder, I can do what I need to do. And one of the things, the reason why I said that, this exact welder, you need to know that. You see these two settings here? That's what usually makes this welder happy on a hot weld. Okay? Meaning I'm welding as thick as I can with this thing. I'm probably going to do multiple passes, whatever I need to do. But these settings for this particular welder, it seems to like them. Actually, that wire feed's a little higher than I normally like it. But, you know, I've got my cold weld. I can turn it down here, and then it's something in here-ish, like if I'm welding sheet metal. And it's just kind of a matter of knowing this particular welder and what it likes. And I had a really great man teach me how to weld. And he said, you know, these numbers on here, they may mean something, but who cares? They're just a reference. And that's the thing with this welder. I know it likes to be between these two numbers right here and here. Somewhere in there is where it likes to do its hottest number for weld. And I can sit there and fiddle with that, given the day, and given even the ambient temperature outside is going to affect it. Still, that being said, this is just a reference point. So don't think, oh, well, I welded on my cousin's Handler 140 and it wanted 4 and 50. I'll tell you right now, this one does not want 4 and 50. If you do that, this one's not going to be happy with you when you try to weld. So it's each individual welder, and that's one of the most important things I learned when I was learning to weld. Every welder itself, every welding machine is going to be a little bit different. And so you need to learn your welding machine and form a bond with that machine. Great thing is, me and this machine have been working together for 20 years now. We've got one hell of a good bond, and it still works every day. I turn it on. It's great. And I mean, you can weld a Suburban chassis together and then the next day come along and weld together your mom's kitchen cabinets. And I would tell anybody, if you can, if you're serious about building up a shop, or, you know, getting into doing this kind of work, and I would encourage everybody out there to pick up tools. That's my real goal with this channel, is encourage everybody to pick up tools, because you can do it. And people will tell you that you can't, and those people are just stupid. And, you know, if you keep your head about you and think, you know, it's like the old movies. They said, in this one movie with the DeLorean, they said, you know, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And I'm not going to lie to you and say that's true, but if you actually bother to put in the time and learn the skill, you can do all kinds of things that you didn't ever think was possible. A good welder is a way to facilitate things you never thought possible. But like I say, use it correctly. Use it wisely. And that's the rig rundown on My Welder.